This podcast is sponsored by Poultry Network's British Pig and Poultry Fair preview. Our featured advertisers include IWS, which is putting water quality at the centre of flock health, helping producers manage clean lines and consistent delivery. Evans Vanadine brings science-led hygiene and disinfectant expertise for stronger crop turnaround. LiveTech is making biosecurity practical with planning, visitor traceability and hands-on farm tools. Avian is celebrating 70 years of Ross with a focus on genetics, performance and the next generation of poultry leaders. After the fair, Muck Management UK is one to put in the diary, with live demonstrations around manure handling, storage, machinery and nutrient value. Ardenwood Shavings is focused on bedding and litter that support bird comfort and shed conditions. Knights Agriculture is raising the standard in poultry housing with integrated, efficient builds. SK Poultry brings feeding, drinking, heating and climate control equipment for new builds and refurbishments. And Midas protects farms through intelligent security, access control, software and connectivity. You can read the full preview and what our sponsors are featuring at the fair in detail at poultry.network/preview. And make sure to visit Poultry Network on stand 6-228.
Hello and welcome to the Poultry Network podcast. I'm Tom Woolman.
And I'm Tom Willings. Tom, how are you doing?
Very well, very well. I've just got back from Ireland, actually, from the Emerald Isle, which is quite funny because that is the subject of today's podcast.
It's had quite a lot of coverage already. I have to say that the Irish egg market is enduring something of a degree of turbulence as demand, happily, has grown very strongly over the course of the last 2 or 3 years and appears to be exhausting supply. And we're going to find out really why supply is not keeping up, because you would have thought in these crazy times that there would be every appetite to build a new poultry shed and produce more eggs for your happy market.
So our special guest for today, who's someone we're quite excited about having on, because she's actually got her own poultry podcast over in Ireland, is Rebecca Tierney from Teagasc. Is it pronounced Teagasc? I guess we can clarify with Rebecca, can't we?
Let's listen to the expert in the room, I would say. Don't ask me to come up with the correct pronunciation. I tend to murder every opportunity on.
So you can listen to this podcast, improve your poultry knowledge, and improve your Gaelic at the same time.
Let's get into it with Rebecca.
Hello, Rebecca. Rebecca Tierney. You are the specialised poultry advisor, aren't you, for Teagasc? Have I pronounced that correctly?
There's multiple pronunciations, Tom. Thanks a million for the invite, but Teagasc is how I pronounce it anyway.
Teagasc.
A good Irish word to maybe cause a bit of confusion in how it's pronounced.
Does Teagasc mean something?
Yeah, so it's the Irish for instruction. So Teagasc, we have kind of three roles. We're advisory, education and research. And I sort of cover all three for poultry. But we cover all sectors of agriculture, so dairy, beef, sheep, tillage, horticulture, forestry, poultry, pigs. So a bit of a mouthful in all that we cover, but an important organisation for agriculture here in Ireland for sure.
And you cover all agricultural, the organisation does?
Yeah, everything. Everything from cows to sheep to pigs to the grass that grows, trees, crops, everything.
Yeah. Well, I certainly know we have got a few listeners to this podcast in Ireland, and I know you've got your own podcast, haven't you?
We do, yeah. Thanks for the plug. Yeah, we have the Poultry Edge. We started just last October, so we're on episode 8. We're quite a bit behind the Poultry Network, but we have to start somewhere. So yeah,
get yourself some of these microphones. These microphones make all the difference, Rebecca. Only this week I had a LinkedIn request from a person claiming to be able to optimise somebody's podcast. So as soon as we're done on this recording, I'm off to go and find out what we need to do to improve next week's. But
I'll have to invest in some nice backdrops and some nice mics and all of those fancy things to try and push us forward. But one thing we don't do is the video element of it. So this is definitely a learning curve today now, the video element of it.
Yeah, Tom and I have started getting our hair done for each week's episode. So
I didn't know it was recorded, so hence my hair isn't done.
Good on you.
So, I was going to say, Rebecca, Tom, I've just come back from Ireland, as it happens. Been over for a couple of days and visited a farm and visited a hatchery. So, lovely country, but not everything is all roses as far as the egg sector is concerned, which is what we wanted to talk to you about today. So, could you just lay out for us what's going on at the moment?
Look, Ireland is a beautiful place, and you hit it maybe, Tom, at a good time when we're actually getting a great spell of weather at the moment. But in terms of the egg sector, there's definitely a shortage of eggs on the shop shelf. Consumers our demand for egg has increased quite a bit in the last number of years. So the average consumption of eggs was 5-6 years ago was 181 eggs per person. We're now up at 215 to 225 eggs per person. So a big jump there, and production just hasn't potentially, expanded to meet that demand. Producers are making money. There is money being made, but in terms of the amount of money being made to expand, and with the current situation in terms of price to build, we've seen huge increases there as well, as I'm sure everyone else has. But the investment cost just isn't hotting up with the returns that producers are seeing, and that's where we're seeing some problems.
And then reading the IFA's report, you're now seeing space on the shelf, so retailers unable to fulfill demand from the shopper, and then again, looking at the report, one response is even to try to kind of restrict the shelf space in the supermarket shelf, the supermarkets themselves. So, you're filling a smaller space. It feels like going in the wrong direction. It feels sort of a self-limiting way of working. But I guess the bottom line is that without confidence, the farmers are not investing to maintain supply to keep up with, what is the great news story of increasing demand. Is that right? Yeah, that's a fair synopsis of it. Like, we certainly see empty shelves. You get pictures in where little Tesco's supermarkets, just empty shelves, or very few eggs left, and it's disappointing when there is both existing producers that could potentially expand, but also people coming that might be interested in joining the sector. And in terms of when you look at the investment to enter the industry, it's so vast that it often puts people off, and then they see headlines like egg shortages and the report stating that the returns just don't meet that investment. So it's a little off-putting potentially for those that are looking to get into it. I do feel that with additional money being fed back to the farmers from that shop shelf price, it definitely would encourage more into it. It's a good industry to be involved in. There's plenty of risks, of course, with avian influenza and the sheer cost to get in, but typically once people are in, they're happy, and they can make a nice life work balance and a nice family enterprise as well, is what I often hear back from our producers, that it works well along people that have young families and can bring them in as well. So I think it's sad really that we're seeing that problem there at the minute, but hopefully that'll all change in time. can we explore the rate of return that is available to farms? Because, perhaps listening on the UK side, the GB side, there are some very familiar messages coming across of inflation occurring at all levels. Let's not pretend that retailers themselves or packers or anybody, any business, is not facing inflation in whether it's labour or power, logistics, whatever it might be. But at farm level, these pressures can be really acute, and if they're not rebalanced with price increases that represent the value of the product, then confidence is lost, as we've already discussed. But we're not, as I understand it, in Ireland, the producers are not being paid anything like prices equivalent to that over in GB or even north of the border in Northern Ireland. So what sort of return is actually available to a free-range farmer looking to build a new shed today? What does it cost to put up a 16,000 bird unit, and headline price? What are they being paid for their eggs?
So to build a 16,000 bird house now, which is kind of the standard size that any egg packer is looking for at the moment, €80, €85 per bird place. You're talking 1.5, 1.6 million euros there of an investment. The other catch that sometimes, which is quite different to the UK and even Northern Ireland, is the sheer land capacity that is required for a free range unit, and that's what our consumer is looking for, is that large brown free range egg. So for every 1,000 birds, our land requirement is actually 1 hectare versus 1 acre. So you're looking at 2.5 times more land.
Yeah.
And that has to be considered in that producer or that new entrant's thought process if they're farming a secondary enterprise. Is it, I have to give up this much land to enter the sector, and I have to descale my other enterprise to allow for that? So there's a trade-off there, and it's that land is very valuable, and they don't want to give it up too easily. But in terms of the price that they're getting for their eggs for a free range, a graded average, you're looking at 153, and that's inclusive of VAT. So the farmer can get their VAT rate of 4.5%. So that includes that VAT already included.
And again, that's euros. We're talking
that's
euros. We're not talking pennies.
Yeah. So when you do compare that to what we're seeing in Northern Ireland and indeed GB, there's quite a substantial difference for the same product, same level of work.
That's one part of it. What is fair value? Because you don't just have to look in the UK market. You could look across into the rest of Europe, and there are eggs being imported into GB that actually probably receiving a higher price than your farmers are receiving, which actually sends my mind off into an interesting place as to why there isn't more demand for egg from south of the border. Because I think if I were a UK processor dealing with eggs from anywhere across Europe and even beyond, I'd be thinking, well, is there good value in eggs that are coming from the Republic of Ireland? I'd want to have a look at that. But the headline price is only part of it. It's the earning potential of the investment. You're making a massive risk. You're putting a lot of money into building the new shed, as you say. €80 a bird or what have you. But the return, if I'm not mistaken, is akin to minimum wage. It's an awful lot of money tied up at significant risk. Before we started recording, we were talking about the bird flu situation. We were talking about the very worrying prospect of Newcastle disease. We've covered that on an earlier episode. To put all of that money in to then be left on a wage that is akin to minimum wage, well, doesn't seem like a great idea. And perhaps that's why you haven't got farmers that are making that investment and keeping up with growing demand.
Yeah, and look, succession and generational renewal is often a very topical subject over here in all aspects of agriculture. But again, an IFA bit of research that was done, or a survey, it showed that a lot of producers didn't really want to see their younger, so their children enter the sector for that reason, that you're working for. They felt they were working for kind of minimal wage. Would they be better go off and be on the other side of the farm gate and bringing a wage in, which is, coming from a farming background, it would be lovely to be able to work on farm, but that's not always feasible. So I think if we can improve the image and the income for the producer, I think we would have more people entering into the sector. So as part of my role, I do some education and delivery of education as well. And you've lots of young people, both female and male, interested in joining the agricultural sector. But I think poultry in general, whether that be the layer sector or the meat sector, is almost a forgotten sector. So I think we need a good news story. And maybe some additional income for our eggs would just be that story to try and entice people back into our sector, because it's always the negative headlines that draw the attention and grab the interest of the industry.
So when I was over in Ireland, and I was staying in Monaghan, and I was staying at a hotel called the Hillgrove,
yep.
And I was interested to learn that only a couple of months ago this was actually the site of some protests. Is
yes.
that right? With poultry farmers protesting, and you're right. It's not just people not going into the sector. The people that are in the sector are saying this is unsustainable, and they've come together, haven't they, with the IFA, and they have actually gone to retailers and asked for more money, haven't they, formally?
Yes. So the IFA is currently seeking a price increase for their producers. Across the board, not just free range. And one of the key things will be to get a differential or a premium price for free range, because as it stands, there isn't a huge difference there being paid to the producers between free range and barn. And with the risk level associated with free range, they don't feel that's fair, which you can understand. So yeah, the IFA will be keen to get a price increase, but the egg packers will be working alongside them as well, to a degree, because they need more eggs. We need more egg on our shelves to meet demand. We're seeing flocks staying in longer to try and compensate for that loss, but we are in a cycle of where birds leave and birds come back in, and that's kind of interfering with that. So it's a solution in the short term, but long term, it's just a case of actually needing more birds. Now, saying that, there is more birds coming into the sector for sure, but in terms of, is it going to be sufficient? I don't feel it will be. So there is more room for expansion there, but I think it's an important point. We need it to be a controlled expansion. We don't want it to be a case where we actually have an overflow of eggs then, and we devalue the product. We know ourselves we have a superfood in the egg, and we have a very valuable product, so we need to protect it and get the fair value for it, the fair price for it, and keep our producers happy.
Am I able just to ask a little bit about the European dynamic? Because on the previous podcast we were talking about the dynamic of Ukrainian imports in particular, and egg imports into the UK market, and what that's doing. See, a big difference between GB and the Republic of Ireland is GB is out of the European Union. Is there potentially a different dynamic at play in your market, where it is easier for retailers to source eggs from different places in Europe and to come in at a retail standard, whereas actually in GB, much as Brexit has caused a huge amount of issues, in a way it has limited some of those external pressures on our market. What's the dynamic like for you?
So we do see some imports coming in. So you definitely see imports coming in. But as I said earlier, we're looking at brown egg, and we did see a scenario where there came in white egg, and it just didn't sell. So that's probably holding us firm, is that the producer just wants that kind of large free range brown egg, and that's what they target when they're looking on the shop shelf. When you enter into any shop, that's what's at your eye line, is your free range large brown egg. We are seeing more mixed weight packs, but I think the colour of the egg is somewhat what holding firm, because from looking over to Europe and indeed even up to Northern Ireland and GB, there is more white egg slipping into our market. To my knowledge, I know of one white flock currently in place in Ireland. So not common practice here, which is potentially saving us. In terms of exporting, I know, Tom, you asked about that or mentioned that. I think it's not that our producers maybe haven't explored that option. I think the quality assurance mark potentially is where we might hit a hiccup. But I think our customers are good at looking out for our quality assurance mark in the Board Bia logo, and that would be potentially an issue with imports coming in as well. So I think the white egg versus the brown egg is probably saving us a little bit, and then we're so used to looking for our Board Bia quality assured, guaranteed Irish quality mark, and that's a help too.
The challenge is making sure that your customer, when I say you, I mean the collective egg industry, making sure your customer values what's being produced on their behalf. And it sounds like, as though, at least at the moment, your request for a recovery of those inflationary costs is not receiving a warm welcome. Not that it ever will, but it's not being acknowledged. And so far, the IFA's request has fallen on deaf ears. Is that right?
So just as recent as the last couple of days or week even, there has been a price increase on one of the larger supermarkets of 30 cent a dozen, is what the reports I heard back.
Back to farm, 30 cents a dozen.
No, so on a price increase on the shop shelf. But
are the consumers paying more?
Yes, but that hasn't.
Very different.
Yes, so that hasn't reflected back just yet, as far as I'm aware, to the producer. But from conversations with the IFA, they're confident that will, kind of fall into their wheelbarrow, as it were, to help with that argument. The other side of it is, though, we're seeing our feed costs increasing by 10 to 15 euro a tonne, is the reports. Fuel is going up, electricity is going up, the price of the pullet is going up. So while it's great to get that additional income that they're seeking, 24 cent a dozen, it's going to be consumed quite quickly with all of the inflationary costs that we're seeing. In terms of the consumer wanting to pay more for the egg, I don't think they want to pay more for any product, and that has been the reality here in Ireland. Beef price went up quite a lot in the last 12 to 18 months, which kind of played into our basket a little bit, because it meant that there was further demand for egg and for chicken in particular. So that was a positive, but it necessarily didn't reflect back on farmgate prices.
What's the solution to all of this then, Rebecca? It feels like the trade's at a little bit of an impasse. Yeah, things are moving, and arguably the pot continues to boil with more cost coming down the tracks for everybody. And make the same point again as it did earlier. But at least if the retail prices are moving on, perhaps there is this glimmer of hope that you talk about. But how does it unlock? How do we get beyond a stalemate of please sir, can I have some more? No, you may not. How do we move the conversation on? What's necessary to put in the long-term kind of structures that mean that farmers can invest with confidence, that fair value for a consumer food is relayed back down the chain?
I suppose we probably look over to the likes of yourselves and how was that achieved? You might be able to shed some light on that, in terms of, is it a case that there needs to be some form of contracts in place, that you're somewhat guaranteed a price? You probably have more experience on that than I have. I've done in the UK.
Well, so I certainly have a good understanding of the UK situation, but it might be an uncomfortable message. I think the UK situation took a very, very long time to unfold, for things to start to move, and a solid year of a clear indication that the lack of confidence was translating into a smaller flock size, as people either suffered the consequences of a dreadful AI outbreak, or they simply refused to reorder pullets because the margins were negative. They're not just not good enough, they were loss-making. And for month after month, sharing these public figures, DEFRA reporting on egg throughput and packing centres and chick placings and whatnot, putting figures in front of retail buyers without any success, because the eggs from the birds currently housed were still sufficient to meet demand. And it was only when that stopped being the case, and that there were the shortages that you're starting to see on the shelf, only when that really bit, I think, was there any movement in price. And what I always, for the last 3 years, I've been amazed by is the extent to which the prices the consumer and the businesses in the chain before the consumer are prepared to pay relative to the price that was necessary to pay back when inflation was at its most severe. Because what has been paid since is well above and beyond what was really asked for or even expected or required. It is simply the rules of supply and demand. So that's the first thing. That might be an uncomfortable message. I think the other thing to say is that through that really painful process, through which there were some pretty big casualties, there have been some very, very strong and I hope long-term changes in the industry, with lengths of contracts, commitments between buyers and sellers. That's both between farm and packer or processor, and then packer into retailer. They are much further forward-looking. So whereas it might have been a 12-month contract, a 3 flock, maybe even a 5-year contract if you're looking at a white bird flock, and the same between packer and retailer, they are now much more commonplace. And the mechanics of price movement, the transparency that means that when costs increase, there is the platform for sensible discussion about how much of that is passed back down the chain. And vice versa, when things fall, then that value needs to be released. They are, again, much more commonplace than I think they were beforehand, because there's a recognition that farming and food production is the foundation and an absolutely vital part of the overall economy, and making sure that safe and high quality food is available on the British supermarket shelf. So there was light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel was pretty dark and it was pretty long before that light shone.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Rebecca, it's probably a good place to wrap it up, and just wanted to thank you for coming on, and wish you and wish all the farmers that you're dealing with and the challenges that they've got at the moment, all the best.
We definitely.
Was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I was just going to say on Tom's point there, there is lessons to be learned from what we seen in the UK, and we were watching that scenario, and our own producers do see the prices being paid, but that wasn't without its own battles, shall we say. So lessons to be learned from that, and maybe we can.
Let's hope. A lot of the retailers are the same, aren't they? So you'd like to think
similar. Yes, exactly.
From what's happened in the UK, yeah.
Yes, certainly. But I think a key point that you guys have as well is that there's great data collection there by BFREPA and Teagasc, and I think that's a powerful tool to have, as you said, Tom, whether it be good or bad. There's an open conversation there. I think that's something we need to aim for as well, to have that powerful data. Knowledge or data is power, and power is knowledge after all. We need to be at that point. So yeah, look, hopefully in the next time we speak, hopefully we'll have more positive news for our egg producers here in Ireland.
We wish you all well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah, fascinating to listen to Rebecca. I've read in the IFA's report that it's like a carbon copy of UK, and I'm not sure it quite is yet. As I said to Rebecca in recording, I think it may be quite a while before you see the sort of cost recovery that the GB and Northern Irish farmers have seen, simply because, you know, at the minute production is stable. Yeah, it's not moving forward, and it's fantastic that demand is moving forward, but the fact that the existing producers are willing, seemingly, to continue to restock and to continue to produce, even though they're not earning the equivalent price of their brethren across the border, or the UK farmers. They're not seeing their price at farmgate increase in line with whether it's feed or it's the cost of pullet or power, etc. But they're still going, and I think that is a marked difference with what happened in UK back in 2021, 22.
And in the UK, of course, one of the big differences there was what happened with feed price, wasn't there, after the start of the war in Ukraine? And that was really the thing that turbocharged the problems in the industry and led to this crash.
That's right. I do agree with that, but I would also say that it was already very, very, very serious before Ukraine was invaded. Ukraine was a very heavy straw on an already very weak camel's back. It was already throughout 2021. You know, we've had all sorts of kind of macroeconomic changes that led to economic pressure in every household, and therefore a real resistance in the chain to accepting inflation when there was the power to deflect and deny. Because there were so many things where there was not that power to sort of keep at bay unwelcome increases in cost. So yeah, I mean, with the cage ban is egg industry specific, but Brexit and then COVID before Ukraine happened, and those things were already incredibly painful through the value chain. So, you know, before Ukraine, we had long since seen the collapse in appetite to build new sheds. We had long since seen an increase in the value of building those sheds. So, you know, you've got costs going up, and you've got stagnant pricing, and that had already turned the tap off. Ukraine. What Ukraine did was, I would say, this is all my opinion, but my view would be that hyperinflation in feed that followed, which really wasn't around for very long. It went very high very quickly, but, you know, people had cover, and there was some protection from that. There weren't very many months where I think many farms were completely exposed to the full teeth of that, but the horror of being exposed to that was enough to put people off, was enough to say, I'm not running the risk that feed will still be, you know, £400 a tonne or what have you, and therefore I am not taking the risk of placing my next flock of birds. And that, combined with, as I said, bird flu and cages perhaps coming out to be replaced with barn, meant that the chick placement figures fell off a cliff, and even that wasn't enough to convince, you know, a very resistant audience, a very resistant group of buyers to start to pay more money. And I think one of the barriers to that is that the amount that was required to patch up the finances was more than had ever been asked for. You know, you'd go and ask for a price increase from a retailer, and it was because the cardboard had got more expensive, and it was a couple of pence or whatever, coppers. Whereas suddenly it's it's 20p, it's 25p, and it's one number this week, and it's another number the following week, and it's another number the following week, and it's like, well, actually, easier just to put your head in the sand and pretend this is not there, and we'll all go down together. It seemed to be the approach, not the attitude.
Well, and I think they very much did all go down together, didn't they, for a while? And the system that we've got and that we're enjoying in the UK at the moment is a result of that folly at retail level. And we always say, don't we, that one of the challenges of dealing with retail is that quite often the people that are in those buying positions are changing quite frequently, aren't they? And so much as it wasn't actually that long ago that we had the issues in the UK, I wonder how much crossover there is and how much memory in some of these organisations and with some of these buyers, how aware they are of what the dynamics were in the UK and whether these could be replicated in Ireland as well.
You raised the great point that, of course, a lot of the chains are the same people. Yes, there is some island-specific retailers in that group, let's say, but there's also some familiar names, and it's a surprise that there's a different approach. It's a surprise that there's the disparity in the first instance, I would say. Rebecca told us again before we recorded that there are not widespread what we would call LTAs or long-term agreements with retailers and their suppliers. That's not an egg comment. That's a general comment where it seems to be perhaps like it might have been in UK a decade or more ago. Quite transactional. A 6-month deal here, maybe a year's deal there, and that flows through the chain. If there isn't that security, then the confidence isn't going to be there either.
Great.
I think we'll be back. I think this will be a conversation that we revisit in months, and maybe it'll take a year. Maybe it might even be more than that. But I suspect this is not going to go away. So look forward to keeping a close eye on what goes on the Emerald Isle in the egg industry. And when we have another conversation, we'll bring it to you.
Brilliant. Till next week, Tom. Bye for now.